When the Body Says No. I've just finished reading a book called When the Body Says No, The Cost of Hidden Stress by Dr. Gabor Mate, a renowned Canadian physician. The book is both challenging and enlightening as Dr. Mate outlines his thoughts of the links between childhood trauma, excessive levels of stress, poorly managed anger, lack of self-care, and the onset of life-changing adult illnesses. It's both interesting and scary as he explains the effect that not only your own childhood, but your parents' and grandparents' lives have on your possible future and how you react to certain situations, i.e. your default reaction. My childhood and the lives of my parents and grandparents set me up for an incredible adulthood, but despite the support I received in my early years, my default reaction was distorted by the trauma I experienced surrounding my lifelong heart problems. I don't remember my first 7 years, but given the later diagnosis of Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome and the lengthy attacks of palpitations I experienced after my open heart surgery at the age of 7, I assumed that those formative years were a struggle, as my heart most likely exploded into disabling palpitations. Years 7 to 21 were very similar, but I remember vividly having to sit and wait for my heart to self-revert from 200 plus beats per minute to 70 beats per minute, and the numerous visits to the hospital. But I think my default reaction was influenced to the greatest extent from the ages of 21 to 38. After being transferred to the outpatient care of an adult hospital, my new cardiologist showed me a technique that I could use to revert my heart after exercising. The technique changed my life, but, as it was very brutal in its approach, also changed my default reaction from patiently waiting to forcefully controlling my heart. When the palpitations were stopped in 2004 via a catheter ablation, I hoped my heart challenges were over. But in 2013, when a new form of palpitation started, I was faced with a dilemma. My default reaction told me to brutally force the palpitations to stop, but, as they were different, I didn't feel confident enough to use that default technique. This led to tension, and my body being constantly in fight-or-flight mode, with the associated hormones being released relentlessly, and the knock-on effect that had on my whole psyche. Thankfully, counselling came to my rescue, and, after experiencing and developing a greater understanding of mindfulness, slowly my default reaction changed to a more peaceful, gentle, and sensitive response, and the undoubted benefits that brought to my life. As well as reducing the occurrences of palpitations and increasing the control of any that started, my default reaction to other situations in life has also changed. I've always been laid back, but without any real appreciation of the problems that can bring, taking on too much, hiding health concerns and poorly managed anger. And that's where the book comes in. Dr. Mate explains the importance of looking after yourself, becoming more proficient at saying no, being a bit more selfish, expressing anger in the right, more beneficial way, and altering the default reaction formed by your childhood, and possibly by your ancestors. At the end of the book, he talks about the power of negative, yes, negative, thoughts, and he questions the damage caused by false positivity, which pushes people on with little regard to the negative implications, example, training to run a marathon while dealing with chemotherapy instead of allowing your body to rest and recover. He outlines his approach to a more genuine positivity which doesn't mask the negative situations that life in general and, in particular, a life blighted by illness throws in our path. One sentence stands out when dealing with requests for our time and talents that may lead to a greater burden on our lives and bodies. If a refusal to take on extra responsibility saddles you with guilt, while consent leaves resentment in its wake, opt for the guilt. Resentment is soul suicide. In this quote, Dr. Mate is not suggesting we become totally selfish, but through the use of his 7 A's, we become more aware of the effect of not being able to say no, and being taken for granted, to push back for your own sake. The 7 A's? Acceptance, awareness, anger, autonomy, attachment, assertion, affirmation. As I said, given its subject matter, it was a difficult book to read. It's definitely not a trendy self-help book with fancy memes and sound bites, but given his unorthodox approach, it is well worth persevering with right to the end. It has certainly given me a greater insight into my journey and a different view on my future approach to potentially harmful situations.